It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Oh, won't you be mine? Oh, won't you be my neighbor? Hey, this is Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. I don't really want you to be my neighbor, but the truth of it is what we put together here is going quite well. You can see tire tracks on the bench terrace, which is going to be underneath a container barn. And what I'm doing today is, since we're almost at level, is basically going to stake out the perimeter of our gravel pad. And I'll share a little bit about that. But first, check this out. Look at those tire tracks. Tire tracks. Tire tracks. Tire tracks. Isn't that amazing? So I didn't even put four-wheel drive on, and I've driven out on top of here to turn around and access this area. It is solid as a rock, and it is going to be finished off hopefully shortly. But I want to show you on the GPS, I geotagged all of, you can see my little pointer down there. I geotagged all of the corners of the stakes of the north-south facing rectangle, which will be the location of the container. We're doing a 40-foot by 48-foot gravel pad, and in order to do that, we need a level platform that is an additional 8 feet all the way around, ideally 13 feet all the way around. You can see the original stakes were put off into the woods. I want to explain something that's really important when you're surveying, and just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. If you mark the corners of a 48-foot by 40-foot rectangle on the ground, north-south facing, and then you move the stakes out of the way in order to start doing the excavation, you're going to end up, for every one stake, you'll have two stakes, because the stakes will represent the XY coordinates, or the height and width of the rectangle. And then when you connect like that point in the woods over there with this point in the woods over here, you're going to end up with an invisible point out on the ground that represents the actual corner of the pad. So I could have staked this better initially to give the operator a good idea about where they're working, so that they don't do extra work when it comes to leveling out your pad. Because again, your pad will be level, not really though. It'll be slightly inclined back into the hill. Whatever you put on the pad will level. The gravel itself will be level. But around the pad, you're going to have kind of a border, and then outside the border, you can slope off. So there's really no need to build a large platform or a large raised area if you don't need that much area. And the next point to make, which is extremely important, a lot of people miss, is that we're not filling this whole area. Part of the area that I'm standing on, actually, if I walk out here, the only fill is this end piece. So you cannot build one of these terraces completely with fill, even for agricultural purposes, without compaction and testing the compaction. So we're not building a dam, we're not holding water, but you can see this piece right here that's been tracked in, that I'm standing on right now, is only about 4 foot up, and it otherwise is only filled on the lower area. We actually cut out the hill, build the clay terrace, or the clay mound that I'm standing on right now, and then the rest of it is cut to give us additional fill. And as the fill increases, the base of the fill increases, or otherwise moves up the original dirt. If that doesn't make sense, we've got diagrams to help you out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around with the GPS, and you can see the track that is forming here. I'm zoomed way in on the GPS, and each of those little squares are photographs where the original posts were. I'm going to get those posts in place, and then I'm going to build a border or an outline around these posts, as well as continue to pick up sticks and rocks. Now I'm focusing on rocks that are just big enough to derail the skid steer. But now that we have a compacted pad, we can start working on our level. The area in which the barn will go, or a pole barn, or a building is going to go, that is going to definitely level under the footprint of the building. Then there'll be a border around it that'll slope slightly away from the building, and then from there it'll slope all the way. Now, why do we do this? Is because we want water to not channel at all, but we want water to slow and spread and move away from the fill area that we have filled in order to build this terrace out. We have raised the soil, just like we did over at Sustainable Homestead Institute for the market garden. We have raised up the soil here by drawing down soil from the upper area. And you can see how deep we've gone, maybe 3 feet deep. And again, we're gonna level this out even more. But now we're at the point where we can start measuring, and we're gonna focus our attention rather on the broader earthworks, on the more narrow scope of our activity. Now, some folks might be thinking, could I have done something like this and then put a pond right there in the middle? Because wouldn't it be sweet to have a pond? Well, this is not how you build a pond. Okay, this is a suitable earthworks terrace for a pole building, for storage, for a non-permanent or a non-occupied structure. If there was going to be an occupied structure, it would be similar, except we would be doing core samples, and we would see how deep the soil is, and you'd be looking for rock base and stuff, because your house is much heavier than 2 containers with a pole barn over top of it. So again, appropriate technology, appropriate implementation, and a paper design that you could have somebody else look at to tell you whether or not it's going to work for your environment. If we got down in here and it was sand instead of clay, we'd have to bring in the clay. If we got down in here and it was rocks, like I didn't really do a lot of video about it because I was busy in the excavator, but over here there were actually just massive rocks. And we'll walk over here real quick while I'm talking. You see more tire tracks. That's beautiful, nice and level. But these rocks over here, these giant rocks, they were much bigger when they were in the ground, and I had to kind of dig around them and break them out. By the way, I've touched every one of these rocks to get them where they are today. But again, that space, once we focus on the rectangle, which is our core landing pad for the containers, everything else is just basic grading. So we're on the home stretch. We've got a nice clay base, but that's still not the end of the project. So make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for the whole project, because we're going to go through the grassing, and I'll show you again, I can grow grass on clay. You can grow grass on clay. It's just a matter of understanding how grass systems work, because it's just not practical to sift. We don't have the equipment to sift all the topsoil to put it back. Now, by hand, we can go through the topsoil over the next couple of years, but we don't have equipment out here to sift out the rocks and make rock piles. We're doing it just like anybody else would, with appropriate tools that we can access as a consumer or as an agricultural site. So the last point I want to leave you with is the GPS is super handy. I guess I should put my thumb over top of the longitude coordinates. Which, note to self, clean that up and edit. The last point I want to make is that we don't have to have this perfect, because a level terrace is not actually level. The bund at the end is always going to be slightly higher. I know I say it so many times, but the bund at the end is always going to be slightly higher. So this edge right here is always going to be slightly higher than where you're standing back in the terrace. And then somewhere on the terrace, we're going to have a cut to bring water away from the roadway, because now we have a terrace and a roadway, to bring water away from the roadway, but not onto the terrace, and then ultimately over to some kind of sump so that we can get that out of the way. Now, that's not a drain. That is just a gentle slope to slowly move and spread that water out and away from our structure. If these things don't make sense, they need to make sense before you start digging up your backyard or digging up something at a farm. And then it has to make some kind of sense. And we have courses and we have on-site practicals and stuff like that, but it has to make some kind of sense before you hire a contractor, because there's a lot of ways a contractor can make this job extremely expensive. Using our community equipment, using a local farm manager, somebody that I work with personally, I trust that he's doing the most efficient job possible, and we still took longer than it's expected because of the weather and other factors. But imagine you get a guy out here that puts the thing on slow speed, sits there in a little air-conditioned cab, puts the music on, and is charging you $1,200 to $2,000 a day to operate equipment. And that's why, again, I want you to understand how to do the surveying. I want you to understand the general idea and concept of what's being done, what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And then ultimately, when you hire somebody, you'll be a lot smarter about it. You don't have to make the investment in the equipment or tools. This is definitely not something you could have done with a tractor. But ultimately, with the appropriate tools and equipment, like we could have got bigger equipment. Bigger equipment would have got the job done faster. But again, it increases the price. And then if you don't have operators for the equipment, or you don't have access to the equipment, or in this case, the job is too small for big equipment. So big equipment could have knocked this out a lot faster, but the job's too small for the big equipment because they'd rather do the whole area. You know, when you got a 25-ton excavator, you don't come in and do something tiny like this. Again, here's what you take away. If you can do the surveying, you can double check measurements. If you understand the key concepts of building a terrace, you won't let anybody excavate all this out and then refill it. You'll understand a little bit about soil types. All these things you can hands-on and in a practical situation implement. We do have earthworks courses, but more importantly, we have the natural building courses, we have the survival courses, we have the key ideas and concepts when it comes to design that we can help you with. Get the help that you need. Don't try to wing this, because you only want to build one of these things once. So again, if it's $1,200 a day, $2,000 a day, have an operator on site. If you're bringing in loads of dirt, it's $600-700 a load of dirt. Sometimes you can get them cheaper. If you decide, oh, this is a funny one that I'll leave you with. If you decide you're going to fill this with rubble in here so that you have a quote drain field on the inside of your bench terrace, and then in 2 or 3 years that actually sinks as it compresses into the ground, and now you have a giant hump, you'll end up with a big wet spot, but underneath your containers there'll be air gaps and space because it's no longer a level terrace. It's now a mess. It's now a muddy, nasty mess. I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. And again, we're going to keep going through this project. We're going to keep taking you through the steps. There's a lot of stuff you don't see, but you would see if you were on an earthworks course. So if you have questions about that, please leave them in the comments or contact us. I don't know if you're as excited as I am about seeing tire tracks out here, but building earthworks allows you to get more from the land without disrupting a large percentage of your property. It helps you get more utility value. It helps you implement things that are going to last for much longer, and ultimately get the most from your small farm or your homestead. I want to thank you for watching. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, www.prosperityhomestead.org with your questions.